If you enjoy our videos and podcasts and would like us to continue putting out regular quality content, head over to patreon.com/aircrewinterview, where you can donate monthly, and in return you will get rewards ranging from early interview viewings, bonus clips, credited as a producer, and much more. Thank you and enjoy.
Came back from that det and went back to Lynham. The dets for the RAF at the time were great. It was 30 days on, and then you'd go home. So you'd go out for 30 days, and you'd fly, well, not in the Telic one, but the later Herrick ones. You'd fly 25 to 26 of those 30 days. And then you'd come home for 2 or 3 months, 4 months, whatever, and then go back out again. The U.S. Air Force deployments tended to be anywhere from 2 to 4 months.
That's a long time, isn't it?
And you would fly every other day there. So you'd be over there for 120 days, and you'd fly probably 60 times, probably about 50 times, counting all the admin and everything else you had to do.
Crikey.
But so yeah, did that. Was on 24 Squadron for a while. I had a great time. They quickly learned my interest/obsession with history, and said that the history room and the historian post in the squadron hadn't been filled in a while, needed sorting, and I volunteered to do that. So I was the historian on an RAF squadron, which always made it interesting when we had the old boys over. And it was a really good time. Really great people in the squadron. Really had a good time. And then 24 Squadron, later then, MOD decided to change 24 just an OCU squadron. So I then moved over to 30 Squadron, because 30 Squadron was staying the operational squadron.
Yeah. 30
Squadron was a fantastic time as well. And I did most of my detachments to Afghanistan for Op Herrick with 30 Squadron. But it was also quite interesting for me to be on 30 Squadron because, again, the historian side of it, I wrote a thesis on the Battle of Crete when I was a university undergrad, and 30 Squadron was in the Battle of Crete, and so it was quite special for me to be on 30 Squadron. And I got to go out I went with 30 Squadron out to Crete for one of the anniversary celebrations, the 70th in 2011. Okay. And basically led the staff ride and went out there as a U.S. Air Force officer with the RAF delegation at a battlefield that the U.S. Air Force was involved in.
Very confusing.
So, yeah, it made it interesting. Much like it did in Op Herrick when I was in Afghanistan flying an RAF Herc, and British soldiers or other passengers would get on and look at me, and I was obviously in a U.S. Air Force uniform, and they'd look, and one of the funnier missions I flew one of your MPs. I can't remember his first name. Rick Gray? Mr. Gray was an MP for Wiltshire.
Yeah.
Anyways, I flew him, and he stepped on board the airplane, and he was confused. He said, "I thought I was flying on an RAF Hercules." And I said, "You are, sir." He said, "Oh, well, surely, where's the RAF crew?" And I said, "This is the RAF crew. I'm the captain." And he's like, "But you're in the American." I went, "Yes, I am." So we did this for 15 minutes, and I had to explain to him that I was an exchange officer on the squadron.
Great story.
Yeah, then I did 4 detachments to Herrick with 24 and 30 Squadron. And that was interesting. I'd only done a couple missions to Afghanistan in the E&H model when I was at Pope. So I hadn't really had much experience. I had a lot of experience with Iraq, but not much in Afghanistan. And then got quite a bit with Afghanistan. Flew mostly at night in Afghanistan, as opposed to Iraq where we flew night and day. Mm-hmm. And in Afghanistan, mostly we were based at Kandahar, and we used to fly to Bastion, Kabul, Bagram, you name it, and used to do that just nonstop, really. And you would do several sectors a night, so you might do a quadruple run to Bastion. So you might go Kandahar, Bastion, Kandahar, Bastion, Kandahar, Bastion, Kandahar, Bastion, and then back to Kandahar. So,
and without interrupting you, Todd, here, how rewarding were these missions? Because obviously you're in live operations or theaters. That must have been quite amazing.
Extremely rewarding, challenging, but exciting, but also, very rewarding. It was always something. I always made it a point to walk down and see the passengers loading and the cargo and chat with some of the passengers. And, seeing some of these young kids, who are only 18, 19 going off into a war zone, and taking them in there. It was obviously even more rewarding to bring them out. To see the happy looks on their faces when they were going home on R&R, where they were going home permanently. It's difficult to talk about, but it could be a bit challenging in some respects too. When we had to do what the American Air Force, the U.S. Air Force would call HR missions, human remains, which you would call a PABA, basically in the RAF, or repatriation, I should say, in the RAF.
That's tough.
I did that quite a few times in Iraq. I only did it a few times in Afghanistan. Most of the time in Afghanistan, the RAF would do it with C-17s and go straight out of Bastion back to the UK. But in Iraq, we did it a lot. And it was quite a somber occasion, as it should be. But we always made it a point as a crew to step out there and stand with the soldiers and render a salute as the caskets came up.
That's great. That's great.
The caskets were always draped with the flag, and we always you generally didn't carry anything else if you were picking the HR mission up. Sometimes you had to, but most of the time you just carried the HR, and we always treated it with the utmost of respect. And it sounds silly to say, but I always, it always rang home to me, like the cost of what was happening in those wars. Seeing that even more difficult, and something I did more of with the RAF in Afghanistan was carrying wounded soldiers, carrying them from Bastion over to Kandahar, Kabul to Kandahar, and seeing some of these lads who, had quite severe injuries on a stretcher being brought on board the airplane. I don't know about the rest of the guys, I'm sure they did as well, but I always tried to make the landings and the flight itself as smooth as I could when they were on board as well, because most of them are strapped onto a stretcher and then either strapped onto a stanchion or onto the floor itself. Definitely one of the more memorable missions that I flew, but one of those more difficult ones to reminisce about or talk about.
Of course,
well, in Iraq, I was flying the E model C-130, which most of them were 1960s vintage. So, and this was 2005 to about 2007. So they were already 40 years old, the Hercs we were flying. They even flew a B model that had been converted into an E model, and you could tell it still had the forward cargo door where it had been. They'd screwed it shut up on the front of the fuselage, but they used to have a forward cargo door. Anyways, so we had quite a few planes. I flew the H model as well there, which had better engines and better air conditioning on it. But most of the time I was on E models. My squadron had E models, and so I got about 2,000 hours on E models.
Wow.
But flying in Iraq, we did a lot of daytime missions, a lot of nighttime missions. It didn't matter, really. You just flew 24/7. And from a threat perspective, the threat was generally higher there. And at that period of time as well, there was quite a bit of threats going on. Some guys got shot at a lot. Some guys didn't get shot at all. Some guys got shot at a few times. That's the category I'm in. But and a lot of times in the daytime, you weren't able to tell if you were being shot at either. Because you can't see it in the daytime generally. At nighttime, you can see it very, very easily. But only 2 times that I can think of that were really quite close. One was going into Balad, or Balad, as the British would say it. And this one I didn't actually see it, but my loadmaster did. Was we had some small arms fire go right by the left troop door as I was on short finals into Balad. But again, the strengths of the Herc, if we'd been hit by those small arms, unless it had hit somebody in the back, AK-47 rounds wouldn't have done much, just put some holes in the fuselage. But that was interesting. But the one I did see, which was more memorable, was I was carrying the U.S. Army Chief of Staff of the Army, basically, the head 4-star general in charge of the Army. And it had already been quite a memorable mission up to that point, but we were taking him into Baghdad. And on short finals again there, I saw 2 projectiles, what I would classify as rockets, fired up at us. There was a Black Hawk underneath us as well, so they were either shooting at him or us or both. Who knows? Or maybe they thought they'd get 2 for 1. But the 2 rockets came up. I saw the 2 rockets coming up at me through the night vision goggles as well, so they were quite bright in my goggles. And you read about all the time, people's reactions. Oh, were you scared, or did you just carry on, or whatnot? It was more just a surprise, really. It was a half a second of going, wow, they're really shooting at me.
It's actually happening,
yeah, it's actually happening. But we the rockets missed us. They missed the Black Hawk. Both us and the Black Hawk did a few defensive maneuvers. I repositioned the airplane, landed on the other end of the runway. It was quite challenging. The runway lights weren't very bright. It was quite dark. We couldn't make out that end of the runway very well, but managed to get on the runway. And the whole time, as soon as we pulled in parking, there was another helicopter waiting for the Chief of Staff of the Army, and he jumped right off, jumped on the helicopter, was completely unaware of everything that had happened. But there was another Herc that was there. Luckily, it wasn't me flying, but there was a guard Herc that was coming out of Mosul one night that took a rocket into the number 3 engine, I want to say. And excuse me, Mosul sits in a little river valley, and just south of the approach end of the runway, there is a ridgeline that had a village on it, and that ridgeline is where they would tend to shoot at us a lot from, and that's where that rocket was fired from. Now, this particular crew happened to be quite low at the time and quite close to that village, to the point that they either think that the rocket was a dud or it didn't have time to arm itself, so the rocket literally hit the engine and didn't explode. So it destroyed the engine just from the kinetic impact of hitting the engine, but it didn't explode, which was lucky for them. So they shut down that engine, what was left of it, and they declared emergency and landed safely. But yeah, Iraq was very interesting. I got rocketed a few times. Again, the most prominent one would have been Balad. Again, I don't know what it was about Balad, but we always hated going to Balad. We were broke. The first time I got to fly an H model, which we were so excited to fly with the bigger engines and the better air conditioning, and we still broke at Balad. And we were getting our stuff off the airplane as a mortar round, I'd say, probably a small mortar round, landed about 30 yards from our right wingtip. There's a big bang and flash puff of smoke, and we're like, wow. And again, that surprise of, is that really what I think it is? Yeah, it is. Oh, crap, we should get out of here. So we quickly threw our bags in the back of a vehicle and got off the pan there, and got into some hardened accommodation with our helmets on and everything. But I had one time in an RAFJ, actually, over in Kandahar. We were parked over on... We normally parked on one side of the airfield, but this night we had to park on the other side to drop off some NATO forces. I think it was NATO passengers. And ISAF. Sorry, I said NATO. ISAF is what I should have said. It was an ISAF mission, and we're dropping off some ISAF cargo on the other side from where we normally park. And while we're sitting there dropping it, we saw another rocket hit the taxiway where we would have been if we'd been taxiing back to the normal parking. I got just over 3,000 hours on the Herc.
Wow.
Just over 2,000 hours on the E model and just under 1,000 hours on the J, and then about 100 or so hours on the H's. So
not bad at all.
All in about 12 years' time. That was mostly the first 12 years of my career.
Awesome. So, do you have any hobbies?
Hobbies. Yeah, I would say yes. My wife would say obsessions. As you can tell from behind me, one of them would be military history.
Yeah.
I read quite a bit. I probably have way too many books and need to get rid of a few more. But no, I like to collect aviation memorabilia, specifically unit patches, squadron patches, that kind of thing. I started that when I was a kid again as well. My dad was an Army helicopter pilot, and he gave me some of his old patches in a bread bag once. And as a kid, I just kept filling up that bread bag, and now I have a few more bread bags than that. But I particularly like military history, not just aviation as well. I study land and naval battles as well. I used to like to do a lot of hunting and fishing and shooting. Not so much here in the UK with the restrictions you guys have over here, but like spending a lot of time with my family, my wife and 2 kids. I'm not one of these guys that like to say, I like to go running or riding my bike or anything like that. No,
I'm the same with you there. Like, I don't do anything like that.
I used to like to play football, or soccer, as we'd say in America. So I did that a lot. But I have played cricket. I wasn't very sober, so it was more enjoyable. But but yeah, so that's probably about it on the hobbies. So I like to do a lot of research. I've started writing some articles for magazines and reviews for books and that kind of thing. And I don't know if I'd call it a hobby, but I'm training to be a teacher now here in the UK. Awesome. I'm getting my PGCE, postgraduate compulsory education certificate for further education. So teaching at the A level and college level. So so far I've been teaching history and public services.
Awesome. This could be, I don't know, this is going to be a difficult one or it could be an easy one for you, Todd. Favorite aircraft you have flown?
Oh, favorite aircraft. I've flown in or flown on the controls? That would be...
Flown on the controls, I would say.
Oh, man. That's a good one. You're going to laugh. I'd probably say the most fun to fly was the T-37, the Tweet.
Really?
The little twin-jet aerobatic plane. Yeah, I mean, that plane would spin like you would not believe, and the aerobatics on it was fantastic, and it had the fastest G-onset rate of any airplane in the Air Force at the time, including the F-16.
Really?
You could literally roll the wings 90 degrees and pop the stick, just jerk back on it really quick and hit 6.5 Gs instant. And many a student G-locked themselves. Most of the students that were killed in the Tweet were G-lock incidents.
Wow, didn't know that.
Yeah, when I was going through flying training, one of my fellow classmates even G-locked his instructor one day. But that was all right because nobody liked that instructor, including the other instructor.
He deserved it.
Yeah.
One aircraft you wish you could have flown?
Oh, man, that's a tough question there.
That's a really tough one.
That's a really tough question. I would like eventually to pay an exorbitant amount of money to go fly in a Spitfire one day. That would be cool.
Okay.
But if it was a jet, it'd probably have to be the Phantom. I think the Phantom would have been a real treat to fly in. I've got other obscure ones. The F-101 Voodoo would have been incredible as well.
Oh, it's a beautiful aircraft. I love that aircraft.
Yeah, or an RA-5C Vigilante or something like that would have been great. Or an F-111. I did have an instructor when I was in Tweets who flew F-111s.
Oh, really?
About it, and he got to actually eject out of a F-111 and didn't have a very good experience. So,
because it has the pod, doesn't it? The kind of
the whole capsule.
Yeah, the capsule.
The whole cockpit goes out as a capsule, and the navigator initiated the ejection before he was ready. So.
Todd, this is from Joe Kunzler, sorry. Todd, how was it like taking the C-130 down low?
Oh, incredible. The C-130 really does well in the low-level environment. It was a lot of fun. It really was. And that, to be honest, that was probably the most fun you could have in the C-130 was flying day, low level. Probably some of the great things I got to do, I flew up in the fjords in Norway in 2 and 3 ship formations in amazing weather. You can really do some impressive things with this airplane. The maneuverability down low is incredible. It's definitely a better ride up front than it is in the back during those low levels. It's extremely bumpy and unpleasant for the paratroopers or whoever's riding in the back. But down low level, it's an incredible airplane. You can really use the terrain. You can hide your Hercules very easily in the terrain. They're really good, especially in the J too. You got loads of power in the J as well. It was in the low level environment. The airplane does really well.
Mm-hmm. And this is like the person wanting to stay anonymous, so I'm going to keep them anonymous, obviously. Which model of Hercules did you enjoy flying the most?
Oh, man. That's a tough one, actually, for me. Yeah. Because the J was incredible for all the technology, and the heads-up display was amazing, and the engines were fantastic. But the E model was also great in that it was all stick and rudder flying. It was very little. In the J, you fly on the autopilot a lot in the J for a lot of the portions of a mission. In the E model, you rarely fly on the autopilot. You only flew the autopilot when you were up at cruise and just didn't want to keep flying straight and level and holding it straight and level. And so, for example, in the E model, you would fly all the approaches by hand. In the J model, you would fly most of the approaches on the autopilot.
Oh, really?
So from a flying standpoint, the E model was a lot more fun. And the H model as well to fly. It was more, there was no heads-up display. All the instruments were analog, most of them. We had a bit of technology. We had a flight management system, and we had a digital vertical velocity indicator with TCAS on it. But the rest of it was all analog. So, and to the point, I always like to throw out there, too, some of the older equipment that was on the E model. We had some of the autopilots on some of the older E models were taken off the B-29.
No way.
And some of the and most of the ADFs, the automatic direction finder, which is a navigation instrument, were the exact same ones as on the C-47, with what we call the little wheel, the little coffee grinder, where you had to tune the station down to null position to get the needle to point at the right signal.
Wow.
So there was some definitely nostalgic moments or technology on the airplane. So.
And the last one, again, anonymous. We want to stay anonymous here. What was it like working with a large crew on the Herc?
It was a lot of fun. It really was, because especially that was another advantage of the Herc is you go on TDYs or you go on a trip or an exercise somewhere, or on a detachment, and you fly with the same crew all the time.
Yeah.
For those exercises or for that deployment, and it was like going around with a group of your best mates. Especially if you were doing a trip, I don't know, across Europe or something like that. You'd be one night you'd be in Prestwick, and the next night you'd be in Ramstein, and the next night you'd be down in Crete at Suda Bay.
Yeah.
And so before you went into crew rest, you'd go downtown with your crew and have dinner and drinks, and it was a lot of fun, actually. And you also had that sense of teamwork, and you could rely upon each other as well.
Yeah.
And the same in the J, but just generally the crews would be a bit smaller in the J. So you might have a 3-man crew or a 4-man crew in the J. So, but working with a big, and when I say big crew, it's not nearly as big a crew as, say, like an AWACS, where you might have, 22 guys in the back and 5 up front. So, but yeah, it was a whole lot of fun, actually. I flew with some amazing crew members. And really was fortunate in flying with a lot of good crews and maintainers as well. I can't say enough about the maintainers.
I think
especially on the E model Hercs, the 1960s models Hercs, the work that they did to keep those planes flying, especially out on deployments. I mean, even in the 1960s E models, we had mission capable rates of 96 to 97, 98% mission capable. And back home it would go down, but it would still be 75% or so.
Yeah.
And the same with the J. The J, there was a lot of the maintenance guys that worked on the J, and it's just a different skill set. They would still do incredible work, but have to plug in different laptops and read cards on the airplane to see what was the fault and replace it. But you could do so many things with the Herc. That was just incredible. Another one short story real quick is on the old E model or H model, you can do what's called a windmill taxi start, which means that if the starter in the engine doesn't work, then to get enough air blowing over my engineer buddies will crucify me for not explaining it correctly. But basically you can jumpstart the engine without the starter.
Really?
What you do is so when the engine's stopped, when it's not moving, you take the starter out, pull and pat it, as they say, and then you turn the blades so that they're on the cuff, so that they're at the perfect angle, and then you go rolling down the runway with the two symmetrical engines up at takeoff power. Wow. And you get up to about 80 knots or so, and that relative wind will eventually start turning the prop over on the dead engine, and eventually it kickstarts it, and it starts going.
Never heard of that before. Wow.
And then you can pull into parking, upload everybody again, and take off and get out of somewhere. And I used that once, in fact, getting out of Kandahar once in an E model. And you can also do it a different way. You can have another similar airplane, use preferably another Herc, but you could do it with another prop airplane, big plane. But you have another Herc pull in front of you, and the wind coming off of his engines could start that engine as well.
That's incredible.
Now, the J model can't do it because of the way that the prop and the engine are connected in the J. But in the E and H model, you could do that. So that was, again, some of the cool things you could do.
So, Todd, where can we find you online?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm on Facebook, but also in particular, I'm on several Facebook groups. One in particular is the Aviation Enthusiast Book Club. Also, I'm on your page as well, the Air Crew Interview. Also on the Flying Graphics Facebook page, which for Scott Sullivan, I am wearing one of his C-130 Hercules shirts out there.
Brilliant.
Show off my obviously incredible physique there. But but yeah, no, I do have an online presence. I'm more than happy to answer questions. But like I said, I probably won't accept friend requests unless I know you. But I'd be more than happy to answer questions on any of those groups or anything like that as well. I'd also just like to say too, as you mentioned earlier, I'm still here in the UK. I've settled here in the UK. And one of the most endearing experiences was on my exchange on the last dining in at Lynham. I met my wife. And my wife, she is still serving in the Royal Air Force. So she always swore she'd never marry a pilot, and I always swore I'd never marry an admiral, and somehow that's happened. But I just wanted to say that was another bonus from my exchange with the RAF. So.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've had a brilliant career, Todd, and you're now settled in the UK. And sounds like you're going to have a great future with your wife and your 2 kids.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, Todd, it's been absolutely brilliant to have you on the show and talk about the Hercules. You've been a great guest, so I just want to thank you very much for giving a bit of your time up.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I'm more than happy to answer any questions in the future as well on the C-130 or my career. I also spent almost 5 years working in a NATO headquarters over here as well, so I can talk all about working with the Army and the NATO standpoint as well. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. It really has.